yourself and let us know what you've got going on, what you've been working on.
Okay, so I'm Suzanne Sussex. I'm the author of the Safe Zone trilogy, or more accurately, the author of the first two books of the Safe Zone trilogy. As you can tell from my accent, I am British. I live in Wales, just on the border of England and Wales, so virtually England, and I am technically English as well. I work full-time for a bank. I have the benefit of working from home, so it's quite easy. My commute is downstairs, where I then open the other laptop. Yeah, it's awesome. Do you want me to tell you a bit about Safe Zone?
Yeah. Tell us a little about the book you're working on.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's going to be a trilogy. Books 1 and 2 were launched in August, and we have book 1, which is called The Greater Good, and The Greater Good is set around the outbreak of the virus, and it has a number of characters, main characters, and it's written from a multi-person point of view, where each of the characters have their own chapter. Chapters, I should say. So we have Chloe and Steve are a boyfriend and girlfriend. Chloe's a 30-something personal assistant, normal, everyday English woman, in my world anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve is a ex-military boyfriend. And when the apocalypse starts, Steve rejoins the army with the belief that the apocalypse will be over very, very quickly and everything will go back to normal. But essentially leaves Chloe on her own. And then we have Sam, who is a 19-year-old Jack the Lad, which is the polite way of describing him. He's a typical Brit on tour, if you like, so boozing and birds, essentially. When the outbreak happens, he's on holiday, and he meets a girl called Sally, and they end up being flown evacuated back to the UK and being put into quarantine together. Now, Sally's dad, George, is another one of the main characters. He is Chloe's boss, and he sends Chloe over to go and over to Heathrow to go and find Sally and bring her out of quarantine. So our main characters all meet at Heathrow, essentially, and the story is really more about their growth than it is about the zombie apocalypse. So there's zombies in it, and they do have to face them, but they're not a bunch of amazing superheroes that go and take down and single-handedly bring peace back to the UK. They are just trying to survive. Yeah, and essentially they're just trying to reach the safe zone, which is where Steve is, and what the army are doing is creating these safe zones around the country. So whilst the story focuses mostly on Sally, Sam, George and Chloe, Steve is within the story, and Steve is telling the story from what's happening in the army. And Steve is really the only character that gets guns. The rest of them have to just make do with what everyday items you'd probably find in the UK, because guns just aren't available here. And so The Great Good is about the positive moral messages, I think. So we've got two, really, which is the selflessness of doing something for the greater good. So primarily that's related to Steve, and actually he's essentially sacrificing his girlfriend without realising it for the good of the people. But there is another twist at the end, which I won't go into because it's spoilers. But there's a twist at the end where actually it's not just Steve. There's somebody else that sacrifices everything for the greater good, essentially. Oh, cool. And then the second book is set 20 years after the first one, and that one's called The Descent, and that rips apart the good moral messages from the first one, and it just gets a whole lot darker, to the extent where it would have been good to be able to censor some of the chapters so my mum didn't get to read them.
I bet they were fun to write, though.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun to write those parts of the stories.
Yeah. My favourite part of the entire both books is a point where Chloe is smashing a zombie's head in with a golf club. I found that really satisfying. But yeah, the darker sides, they're not the typical Walking Dead darker sides where there's a big gang and actually they're just all powerful and want to rule the world. It's just a guy that is just misguided. He gets into a position of power and wants more, and through circumstances that are caused by him, but he didn't realise the consequences of what he's done, he ends up needing to take more from others because he's managed to basically screw up for his people. But he just descends into darkness, hence the descent. And the third book will follow on from that. So we've got the first book that's at the outbreak, and the second two books are 20 years later. How has humanity got on? Are the zombies still wandering the countryside? Are they still a threat? Who's bigger threat? Is it man or is it zombies? So yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah, that's interesting. We had talked a little bit before this video about kind of my comic with the artificial intelligent robot waking up 5 years in the zombie apocalypse. And that's one of the things I'm exploring is kind of that same aspect, the whole just, gangs of people, this bad person ends up being not that bad, like what Walking Dead usually does. I wanted to try to avoid that. So yeah. I started with just, a guy basically who wanted to do good, kind of like what you were talking about, the greater good, and just watching it spiral out of control and to turn into almost like Frankenstein's monster, something he didn't really want, he has no control over. Those are really fun things to write, I find, in zombie stories. And we talked a little bit about this earlier too, and I wanted to make sure we touch on it in the interview, is you mentioned that there weren't a lot of guns in your story, and how that's basically directly affected by the different culture of what we see in America in zombie stories, because guns are everywhere in America, different from the UK. So I was wondering, like, how you dealt with that kind of difference with a UK story.
Yeah, so the army has guns, obviously. And in the UK, we are allowed shotguns, but you do have to have a license, and it's quite difficult. And they're not great. I'm sure they're great, but they're not extensive, and you wouldn't have the same sort of quantities you would have in America potentially. And they're also not that easy to come by. So you couldn't just go, I couldn't walk out my house and break into all the houses on my street and find like half of them have got guns. If I wanted to find guns, I would need to, I just wouldn't even know where to start. And without Google to find the local gun shop, then I would be in trouble. So I kind of wrote it all from, if it was happening to me, if I was Chloe and I'm sat in this house on my own, there's zombies wandering the streets outside and the whole world's gone to hell, and I need to go because I've been told I need to go and get somebody from the airport. How am I going to defend myself? So I literally went around the house and, as Chloe does in the book, and just looked at all the things I've got and thinking, actually, I haven't really got a whole lot. So I then had to move into what would normal people have in their houses. So things like rolling pins, a drill, like how useful is a drill going to be? I mean, we don't even have things in the UK like baseball bats. We have baseball bats, but they're not a standard thing everyone has in their house. And even cricket bats. I don't think I know a single person that owns a cricket bat, so really? We can't get heat on people. And with me, I don't even do gardening, so I haven't even got a rake. Yeah, I'm just so limited. So I kind of took it from that point of view, and then so they had to get a bit creative to some extent with the weapons. And part of the problem is when they die, they don't want people to turn into zombies, so they have to obviously kill people damage a brain before they turn, which is quite an easy one. That's a knife, generally. But there's a time when they're stuck in Heathrow Airport in a airport lounge, and there's zombies outside. They've got no clue about what to do, and they do actually have a shotgun at that point, but only one person has any clue how to fire it, and obviously shotguns, so they're going to draw everybody else, all the other zombies as well.
Yeah.
So they dismantle a table and use the solid wood table legs to then basically use as weapons and just run as fast as they can. They do use some of the wine bottles and throw them, not at the zombies, but over a balcony that's at Heathrow to smash on the floor, so it draws their attention. But yeah, it's
to create a distraction.
Yeah. So the book's very much about they're not going to take over they're not going to be these amazing heroes that are going to save the world. They're just normal people just trying to survive and live to get to the safe zone.
Yeah, it's such an interesting difference. Like, because here in the United States, you can get guns at gun stores too. We have way more of those, per square mile. But on top of that, you can also get guns at Walmarts, which are everywhere. At any kind of no name sporting goods store, you can get it. And then there's the fact that lots of people already have guns in their house already.
Yeah,
that's just a really interesting difference to kind of hear. So that'll be cool to see in your book. Let's see. Let's go ahead and talk about kind of your process a little bit more. I'm interested in kind of how you formulate your idea, how you move from having an idea to writing the book. Like, how do you make your arcs and your character development, and like, what do you do to prep?
So with The Greater Good, I did no prep. So that's my first book. Started writing that in August last year. The idea for that came after a conversation, the typical conversation you have, what would you do in the zombie apocalypse? And my boyfriend, who's ex-army, said, I would rejoin the army. And then when we was having a random discussion one day and I was moaning about a book I was reading I wasn't enjoying, and he said, well, why don't you just write your own? And I'm like, what would I write about? He says, write a zombie apocalypse where a guy goes and rejoins the army, leaves his girlfriend behind. And it kind of started from there. And I can't even remember where I started the book, if that makes sense. All I remember thinking is I want to answer one of the questions that very few zombie books and films and all of that does, which is where did the virus come from? So like, take Walking Dead, he wakes up and this virus is already here. There's no real explanation. Even when they get to the CDC, they don't really explain how it's happened. Many books I've read, one day zombies just appear and that's it. So I kind of started it with, I need the virus to come to the UK and I need it to spread realistically across the UK in a very short space of time. So I played around with that quite a lot. And originally Sam's character was going to bring the virus to the UK, and through him and Sally, they were going to spread it. However, I gave my book to another author for some feedback, and he was going, I really like this character. You can't kill him. You need to build him in the story. And that made me rewrite the entire piece, everything I've written.
That happens.
Yeah. And I was only about 25k words in. I didn't rewrite it all. I just changed quite a bit. And then I actually changed Chloe into first person as well, because I kind of found that I was struggling a little bit with making her sound real and writing her in third person, when essentially Chloe is kind of a little bit me. Not totally, but just a little bit me. And I guess writing is like anything. The more you do it, the better you get. And it's kind of like, as soon as I started and then I kept reworking it, I just kept coming up with ideas. And it's now getting to the stage where I've got like notes. Like I've got a couple of notepads that have just got random things, like one word in some cases, just scrawled and going, you need to write this next. I would love to be a planner. I'd like to be one of those people that sits there and plots out chapter by chapter exactly what's going to happen. But without sounding too naff, I'm a great believer that my characters tell me. You're freezing a little bit over that, and yeah. My characters tell me. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. My characters kind of tell me where they want to go. So Sam, I didn't plan for Sam to be a bad boy, but because I was going to kill him, I didn't want people to like him. I didn't realise by making him a bad boy, people wanted to see what happened to him.
Right.
So yeah, they just kind of, it's so hard to describe, and you'll know because you write yourself, but they just tell you what they want. And sometimes
I can definitely understand that. There's times when I'm writing where it's like I'm reading the story as I'm writing it. I'm like, whoa, that character did something really interesting, even though it came from my brain and I put it in the thing. With comics, it's a little different because you have issues, volumes, and then like the full arc. So I planned the full arc first, and then I planned an arc for each volume, which I'm going to have 8 of. and then I planned arcs for each issue within those volumes. So I
Yeah.
have 8 issues per volume, 8 volumes per basically, yeah, that story. And this is a lot of advice that I kept hearing because I did a lot of research when I first decided to do this. Was don't let your first thing that you're working on be your big masterpiece. Like, you're going to be terrible if you're just starting. So be terrible on little fun projects. I didn't listen. Uh, Luckily, I didn't like push and do everything all at once. What I have completed is just a 10-page. It's called an ash can. It's like a little mini comic, just kind of show proof of concept, an introduction to the main story. It's like issue 0 is usually how they refer to it. So that's what's completed. But I have plans for, that series that I'm working on now is going to be 64 issues. And then I have plans for a part 2, which, because he's an AI robot, he'll be shut down and then he'll be woken up like 100 years in the future. Because that's also something I found really interesting is like, how does society evolve after a zombie apocalypse? And this is my way of exploring that. So he's brought up, and a good excuse to watch Game of Thrones, which we were talking about earlier, about how Game of Thrones is almost a zombie TV show. So it'll have that kind of feel. Like, I picture, hundreds of years in the future, people probably set up little kingdoms and things like that. So it'll have a very kind of Game of Thrones feel. But, of course, I have all the little ideas that are going to make it much different. And then I have an idea for another 64 issues for a third story where it's, again, he gets shut down at the end of that one and turned back on hundreds and hundreds of years in the future, where we're more like space-faring. Did you watch Firefly at all?
No, I have never watched it. I'm scared to. Doesn't it end without ending?
It's worth it. It's worth it. It's sad that it doesn't continue. I always, like, whenever a show, I'm like, oh, this show's coming back. In the back of my mind, I'm always like, I wish Firefly would come back. But it's a fantastic show, and it's kind of how I see that last chapter of my story being. Like, it's about them being in space. It might not even be zombie related at this point. That's just something that I was really interested in kind of exploring as well, is how society evolves after the zombie apocalypse. But with a robot, I kind of have the luxury of looking really far into the future.
Yeah. The dystopian I'm planning, and I say planning very loosely, but it's when I finish Safe Zone, it'll be what I write next. It's set in the same universe as Safe Zone. There's no zombies at all, but it's 200 years later, possibly more. I haven't decided. So there's no related characters. The impact of the zombie apocalypse is actually kind of like no longer relevant.
Yeah, just like in the history books.
Yeah, because by that, 200 years down the line, society would have repopulated. Possibly, I need to do some maths on that one, but yeah, I think possibly. Yeah. The link is something that happens in book 2. They find something in book 2 that makes them think, actually, zombies, by the fact they exist means you've cured death. To some extent, because you have reanimated corpses walking around. There's some fundamental flaws with them, the fact they want to eat people. But what if you could take the good parts of the virus and turn that into a cure for death?
Interesting, yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where the next one's going. So I'm not going to mention the word zombies at all. That's my plan, to somehow explain the drop, but not mention it. And yeah, see what happens in 200 years' time.
That would be a cool concept, especially if you do keep those zombies like hush. Like, it's been 200 years, that people might not even know what the word zombie even means anymore. But to still have it be connected, because the cure for death, if you're following your series, you're like, oh, that cure for death is the zombie virus. Okay, yeah, that's a cool concept. Here's a good one. Audience building. Once we get past what we have already talked about, turning an idea into a point where you can start writing your story. Once you know what your story is going to be about, you can start building an audience so that when your story's done, there are people who know you exist and you have eyes on your story. How did you go about? What did you do to build an audience, manage an audience, maintain one?
Yeah, I didn't. And if I could go back in time, I would. I was very, very lucky, though. I follow another author, another Zombie author, and he has an amazing Facebook group called The Living Army, and I've been a member of that for longer than I've been a writer, and it's supposed to be about his books, but it just descends into chaos, but in a good way. But it's a really good bunch of people, and I was really fortunate that when I released my book, that author publicised the fact I've released the book on that group, and then on his Facebook page as well. So I had lots of people that I never reached out to at all, never, publicised myself as Suzanne Sussex, and he did it for me. So I don't know if he ever knows how grateful I am for that, because it's just made such a huge difference. And then from there, I started joining. There's loads and loads of zombie groups on Facebook. Not huge numbers of book-related ones, but I've just started getting into those and making sure I'm contributing and talking. My biggest challenge is I kind of forget who I am sometimes. So Suzanne Sussex is my pen name, and I forget that I've joined the group under my real name as well. So yeah, it gets a bit bizarre. So I would recommend either using your own name or getting rid of any social media presence if in your real name, because it's just really hard work. And I think the other challenge with zombies is a lot of other writers can be a little bit derogatory and readers, to be fair, of zombie apocalypse books, for a number of reasons.
They've got strong opinions.
Yeah, and it is like Marmite, and it's even more like Marmite than vampires, which Twilight, either helped gain millions of vampire fans, but also helped annoy millions of people to hate vampires forever. I don't know what it is with zombies that did that, but something has, and I don't know. I've had quite a few of my friends and family read the book, and they would never have read a zombie book. And my ambition is to sort of turn one person into a zombie fan.
That's a good goal to have.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know if it's happened, but yeah, that's the plan. So yeah, I think if I could go back in time and do it all again, I would have started. I'd have launched my Suzanne Sussex profile a long time before I'd released the book. But to be fair, when I started writing, I never actually thought I'd be published. It was just I started writing, so I wanted to prove to myself I could write a book, and then yeah, it was all a bit of a whirlwind getting published, and then realising I need to start doing a bit of promotion now. So I'd recommend to anyone out there, before you publish, go and network, but don't just sell. There's a lot of book clubs it's just for authors to promote books, and it just seems to me that it's authors to promote books to other authors, which aren't really your target audience. And you'll see the same person posting the same book like day in, day out, and it's just like it might work to like brainwash you into recognizing this author because you're just seeing them constantly, but actually it can be a little bit off-putting as well for me.
Yeah, to me it's about adding value. You need to add value for the people who are loyal enough to come to you, to see what you're doing, to look at the the works in progress that you post, to buy your final product that you come out with. And that's one of the things that all of my social media that I absolutely live by. Most of what I put out there is just fun little things, fun little comments, little thoughts I have, questions to get people engaged.
Yeah.
Tweeting other people's stuff. I have a Twitter. It's at New Zombie Comics, and I tell anybody who sends me a direct message, or even if someone just says, "Hey," like on my Twitter feed, welcome. And if you tag me on anything zombie related, I retweet it. Like if you've got something to sell or it doesn't matter, like I'll put that stuff out for other people. And then usually I have like my pinned tweet, being my thing. So to me, it's all about adding value. That's why I like with my newsletter. My newsletters are mostly about these interviews, providing information to people who, like me, want to know about publishing or building an audience, or even just zombie fans who just want to hear zombie content creators like you talk about what we all love so much, all the little aspects of a zombie apocalypse. So we're kind of near the end of the interview here. I'd like to kind of pick your brain on what you like zombie content-wise. What kind of zombie content is out there that you really enjoy consuming?
There's something about rebuilding society that fascinates me, and I think that's why I like zombie apocalypse and post-apocalyptic. Really, it's just like, how do you react when everything you've taken away, you got, and our creature comforts have gone, and that really fascinates me. But equally, I've read so much now that it can get a little bit samey. So there's been some authors recently that I've found that are quite different. So there's a guy. His name's W.J. Watt. He released Highland Hunger, and it's basically set around Brexit and the Scottish referendum to split from the UK. And he's managed to take that whole political landscape and turn it into a zombie apocalypse, which is just quite an incredible thing to do. And not only that, he hasn't made your traditional, you get bitten, you die, you turn into a zombie, zombies. He's made this group of essentially patriots of they get injected with a virus, or they catch this virus, and they become like cannibals, but only when they're in a battle. So it's a fascinating different take on. It's like he's never, in the best possible way, he's never seen a zombie and never been influenced by what the traditional view of what a zombie is, and I love that.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And then there's another guy, Michael Whitehead. He's done a zombie apocalypse set in Rome, ancient Rome, which is just, again, it's same as we just talked about. It hasn't got, you don't have guns, you know, you have swords and spears and stuff like that. So yeah, at the moment I'm kind of looking for that new something a bit different. And when we were talking earlier, Santa Clarita Diet, the TV show, absolutely love that. It's funny. Drew Barrymore is a great actress, and it's just such a different take. And she's a zombie, but you just can't hate her. It's lovely. So it's that new content, and I love your idea. I think your content's fantastic and very, very different.
It's one of those things where when I had the idea, I was like, is there anything out there like that? And that's one of the advice that I got was, write what you want to read. Like, if there's not something out there and you want to read that story, write it. There's probably thousands of other people out there who want to read that same story. So I'd like to let you use this time right now to kind of do shout outs, let us know how we can find you, all your social media that's out there, maybe some projects you're working on, maybe some projects you're working on with other people, or any books out there from other authors you'd like to give a shout out.
I'm easily found on Facebook and Twitter. So I'm the only Suzanne Sussex on Facebook and Twitter, which is quite helpful. And I've got a website, which is www.suzannesussex.com. And my books are on amazon.co.uk and amazon.com, and they're Safe Zone, The Greater Good, and The Descent. And hopefully, end of November, if all things go well, the final book in the trilogy will be out as well. And yeah, if I was going to give a shout out, I'd recommend that anybody that likes zombies reads The Undead by R.R. Hayward. I think he's at 21 days, and he tells the zombok happening day by day, and he has a very different take on zombies as well. And it's just an incredible series, and it's the only zombok series that makes me laugh out loud on one page and then cry on the next, because you just love these characters. 21 books in, you just love these characters so much. So yeah,
wow, sounds like a really good book.
It's awesome. Yeah, and he's a great writer, and he's got some other books out as well, but it'll always be the zombie ones for me.
Right. Okay. Well, Suzanne, I appreciate you taking the time a little bit longer than we anticipated with the technical difficulties that we had before, but I appreciate you sticking through it.